from the Digital Media Center on the campus of Southern Oregon University in Ashland, Oregon. This is Ramping Up Your English, an educational program for intermediate level English language learners. Here's your host for Ramping Up Your English, John Letz.
Welcome to Ramping Up Your English, winner of the Southern Oregon Television Award for Program of the Year and the award for Best Educational Program. I'm the host and producer, John Letz. Ramping Up Your English is an educational support program for intermediate English learners. It's a program for people from all language backgrounds. Ramping Up Your English is also for people of all ages. Now, if you've already passed the beginning stages of learning English and you want to reach higher levels of English proficiency, this program is designed to meet your needs. We take a content-based approach to helping you reach higher levels of English proficiency. Our current thematic unit is animals. This is segment 1 of episode 60. In our last episode, we learned more about reptiles and the traits that an animal has to be classified as one. Now, scientists agree that the ancient reptiles were the first life to leave the ocean and establish life on land. In our next episode, we'll revisit some of those reptiles when we explore life cycles. Humans begin their life cycles as babies. They're given live birth and they already have the instinct to drink milk from their mother. But no one confuses a baby with an adult human. Babies don't look like another species, but there's a noticeable difference from adults. Now, babies grow up to be young children, resembling adults more closely, but still distinct in many ways. This puppy also has changed its original appearance. Eyes are open now, and the puppy is much more active than it was when it was first born. The young child is also more active. Both are a lot of fun to be around. Only the mother is mature. Both the puppy and the young child have some growing up to do. Both need a lot of protection and care before they reach maturity. Now check out this family. We see people at all stages of their life cycle, the youngest and the older kids, the adult parents, and the grandfather in the final stages of his life cycle. The young adults are still at an age where they can start the life cycle over again when they have children. Now, when you research your chosen animal for your report, you'll want to gather information about its life cycle. Some animals look very different from adults in the early stages of their cycles. This is especially easy to see among invertebrates. Now, what I mean when I say invertebrates is this. There are animals with no backbones. A vertebrate is an animal with a backbone, and an invertebrate is an animal without one. Now, some of these invertebrates look so different from other animals, you wonder if they're from another planet. Yet some of these maintain traits of the first living animals on Earth. They definitely are natives of our planet. Now, this jelly is an invertebrate. It has no backbone. It has no outer skeleton either. Its body is gelatinous and is supported by the water in which it lives. It has muscle and connective tissue, so it can move, as you can see. These graceful creatures are often called jellyfish, but that's confusing. They are not fish. Fish are vertebrates, and jellies are not. Now, jellies look beautifully graceful in the water, mostly floating. Their tentacles hang down to trap tiny creatures, which they digest to nourish themselves. Now, like many invertebrates, jellies reproduce by creating a huge number of offspring. Now, many of the offspring feed other marine creatures, but enough of them reach sexual maturity to reproduce, and this keeps their species alive. As with many invertebrates, they produce a generous amount of food the animals around them can eat. Now, when we use the term life cycle, we refer to how animals mate and reproduce, as well as the stage their young pass through on their way to maturity. We also include the parent's role in their upbringing. Now, it's amazing what an animal can do without a backbone. Consider the octopus. While they don't have a backbone, they make up for that in arms. They have 8 of them. They have other adaptations as well, ways to escape predators as well as hang on to rocks and find and eat their own prey. Now, sea stars were once called starfish, but like jellies, they are not fish. They're invertebrates. Now, some of them have 5 arms, but others have more. This sunflower star was discovered in the act of eating a sea urchin. They have an unusual way of doing this. Once they capture the urchin, they distend their stomach into the shell of the urchin and digest it from the inside. And that's what's left of the urchin right there. Now, these fish seem to be swimming among colorful plants, but these beautiful forms are animals known as coral. There's an example of invertebrates right there. Coral also reproduce by way of large numbers of eggs. Again, most of them are eaten. They must also find a place to establish themselves. Now, here we get a good look at a healthy coral reef. I recognize staghorn coral and brain coral. Now, there are other types in this view, but I can't identify them. Maybe you can. Let's follow this sea turtle as it swims through this coral reef. The turtle is a vertebrate, having a backbone inside the shell. The coral comes in 2 basic types, hard coral and soft coral. Worldwide, coral reefs are showing the stress of climate change. President Obama has set aside a large marine area for the protection of coral reefs and other ocean life, but there's no place to hide from the effects of climate change. Now, while most of us don't see coral reefs and jellies every day, we can be impressed by what they tell us about the diversity of life, especially from our invertebrate cousins. If the idea of not having a backbone seems a bit creepy, you won't feel that way when seeing the grace and vibrant color of many invertebrates. Be it coral, sea stars, or jellies, we're blessed to share this earth with so many amazing creatures. We'll see more of them soon. This ends segment 1 of Ramping Up Your English. We'll return with segment 2 after this. Organization that's doing big-time restoration of forests and stream banks. Hello, I'm John Letz, producer of Adventures in Education. You're watching Ramping Up Your English, a content-based approach to intermediate English learners to reach higher levels of proficiency. Our current unit is animals, and we've been enjoying some of the Earth's most beautiful invertebrates. Invertebrates don't have backbones or internal skeletons, but some have external skeletons called exoskeletons. This spiny creature is a good character of an animal called a crustacean. The hard shell with sharp points provides protection from many predators. Some crustaceans shed their hard shell during times of growth, leaving them vulnerable between times when their new shell hardens. Now, this tree crab is another example of a crustacean. Unlike turtles, which are reptiles, crabs don't have a backbone underneath their shell. Their outer shell gives their body its shape and form. Their soft tissue is found inside. Some crabs have gills under those shells, allowing them to get oxygen directly from the water. The best known invertebrates are the insects we likely see every day. Now, insects have exoskeletons, and the bodies of their adults are divided into 3 main parts. Pictured here are some insects with which you may be familiar. You may not know the English names yet, but you may recognize some of these. This diagram shows those 3 main body parts plus some common appendages. Now, these include 6 legs and 2 antennas, as seen on this beetle. Now, the abdomen is the larger part at the rear, and insects have tiny holes there through which they take in air to get oxygen. Beetles are the most numerous insects on Earth, and there are many different species, some of which are just now being discovered. Now, can you tell the insects from the other specimens here? They all have exoskeletons, but you can easily see the difference by counting the legs. The scorpion, the large one in the center, has 8 legs, as does the spider in the upper left corner. The insects have 6 legs. Now, scorpions are not insects, but they do have an exterior skeleton. They also have 2 large pinchers. They use those to hold their food so they can eat it. They keep their prey from escaping by stinging them with their long tail. There's a poison in the stinger on the end. That immobilizes their prey and makes it easier for them to eat it. Now, we have brown scorpions in southern Oregon. They can cause a lot of pain in someone who gets stung by them, but the venom is not lethal to humans. Now, one of the insects that's been on the world or in the world since before the age of dinosaurs is the dragonfly. Along with filling their crucial role in the balance of nature, these fascinating invertebrates delight our human children. A close cousin is the delicate-looking damselfly. Now, similar to dragonflies, these insects are often found around water. In fact, both spend most of their lives underwater. It's part of that dramatic change they go through as they mature called metamorphosis. This one is seen eating an insect. That's the main diet of dragonflies and damselflies. Can you see, if you think back on what you just saw, there was an insect wing on the leaf from what it was eating. Now, this is another damselfly. Their life cycle begins as an egg, then a larva, and finally as a mature adult that people see flying around or hanging around on a leaf. Dragonflies and damselflies are closely related. The best way to distinguish them is to observe them at rest. Are the wings still extended to the side? Then it's probably a dragonfly. If the wings are folded back, you're probably looking at a damselfly. Both are predators, which is true of the larval stage and the adult stage. Larvae are said to eat just about anything in the water smaller than themselves. Adults catch insects in the air using their excellent eyesight and their amazing flying ability and their legs and feet. Females lay clutches of up to 1,500 eggs while their mate holds them up in the air. Once the eggs hatch out, the larvae sink into the water to begin life as a macroinvertebrate. Loss of wetland habitat threaten dragonflies as they need water for the majority of their lifespan. Most species spend most of their lives underwater as a nymph. Now, damselflies form external gills for this part of their life cycle. Dragonflies have their gills on the inside. When ready for adulthood, the nymph floats to the top of the water and begins using its lungs. They swallow enough air to puff up their body and their wings spread out for the first time. There's so many really cool insects. Speaking in general terms, invertebrates, including insects, begin the life cycle as one of an extremely large, numerous egg bunch, and some hatch into nymphs, which are just smaller copies of their adult parents. Now, those that are not eaten by something grow up to be adults, mate, lay eggs, and die, starting the cycle all over again. Notwithstanding that short life cycle, other insects begin as eggs, but then take a larval form that's totally different from the adult. Those that go through complete metamorphosis then pass into a pupa stage, which doesn't look like the larva or the adult, and finally become an adult, mate with another, lay eggs, start the cycle over again. A great insect to watch and witness these changes is the darkling beetle. Hatching from eggs, these larvae are called mealworms. Now, that name is misleading because these are not worms. They're the larva stage of a beetle. The larvae grow larger, shedding their skin from time to time from their earlier smaller bodies. Now, watch how these students react when they become acquainted the first time with the larva.
Fruit's color is yellow. I love it.
Yeah. And so
It's flexible.
oh my gosh, look at it. Just look at it. Seriously. But it's a part of nature.
The magnifying glass?
My alley.
National.
Oh.
Yeah, I see him.
Don't joke like that with the wheels. Hey, I never done that before.
I found two little things at the very end.
They're probably the little spikes. They are.
I already have them.
It feels weird when they're in your hand.
Scary.
They tickle bad.
They have like little white stuff right here on the end where the little spikes are. They have little white stuff if you look really close. And I don't know what that is, but it looks really cool.
After 3 weeks, we watched larvae change to pupas. In other 3 weeks, pupas started turning to adult darkling beetles.
Still. The kids eventually get pretty attached to the larvae, especially after handling them and measuring their growth. Then the unexpected happens. The larva skin splits open and this pale white pupa comes out. Some of us were lucky enough to see it exactly when it happened. Usually we just find the pupas among the remaining larvae. The larvae rarely move, but they attract much attention from the students examining them with magnifiers. Eventually, the pupas transform themselves into adults. Again, most students are reluctant to touch the adults, but it takes far less time for them to warm to the idea. Now, there's more of the tickling that goes on as the adults crawl across the skin. Description skills are stretched as the students learn ways of describing the beetles at all stages and note the changes that take place at each stage. When the kids have witnessed is complete metamorphosis. Now, not all insects go through all these stages, but they all do surprising things as they change from eggs to adults. Let's learn more about insects from this video.
The bug. He's crawling.
All this excitement is about the emergence of a darkling beetle. It's not just any bug. Students have watched this insect grow from the larva stage to the adult that crawls on their arm. There's some reluctance to touch the larva, but it soon becomes fascination.
The dark and the color of their skin is darker. Like they're getting into the pupa stage.
It is in the pupa stage. Their antennas are little.
Look at its head, it's black.
No, it's not.
Come back.
You're looking at the tail. That's the head. This is the tail. This is the tail.
Come up.
One of the first surprises is when the larva changes into a pupa, leaving its skin behind. The kids learn patience, giving the larva time to grow into an adult. I asked what students learned about insects.
Insects have 6 legs, like this, and some insects eat other insects, and insects have 3 body parts.
What's that?
Insects have 3 body parts.
Can you show me?
Insects have 3 body parts.
Can you show me on the insect? Show me the 3 body parts. What are they called?
Head, thorax, abdomen.
What do you know about ants?
They live in colonies?
Keep going, yeah. What else?
Oh, I know. They use their heads to block passageways that they don't want enemies to come in. So they use their heads, they put their head like in the hole like that.
You know a lot. Okay, Jennifer, what do you know about ants?
They use the antenna to communicate.
That's true. What do you know about bees?
Oh, I know something about bees. Oh, I know. They're hairy. I got one, Michelle. They dance to tell them where to go. Like, and go get honey and nectar. Some. Yeah, where they find
Not all of them. Don't they let the wasp?
What do you-
Doesn't the wasp turn
They're
into
wax.
paper?
No, that's wasp.
That's what I said.
Wasp.
The wasp.
And then,
Oh my god. Conflict over
bees
here.
do it with honey wax.
You're watching Ramping Up Your English, a fun and less stressful way for intermediate English learners to get a better handle on learning English. This is segment 3 of episode 60. This episode is all about life cycles, and we're taking a look at insects and their unusual life cycle. Now think of the last video. Could you imagine if your children underwent such drastic changes in appearance at different stages of their life? Taking a worm to a baseball game would be downright weird, and taking one fishing would be outright dangerous. Now, some insects are pests. Mosquitoes, horseflies, yellow jackets, and gnats all come to mind. Nonetheless, there are many insects that we depend on for our own survival. Those that pollinate the plants we consume for food definitely qualify for that. Now, the work of pollinators has often been ignored by people, but as they start to suffer reductions in their populations, that ignorance has become dangerous. Farmers, conservation groups, and even President Obama have encouraged people to provide for the habitat needs of pollinating insects. These include bees. If people plant the right vegetation, these pollinators have a greater chance of survival and of reproducing the next generation of pollinators. Now, many of these bees are natives to the areas where they live, but much of their habitat has been lost to development and agriculture. Another problem is seen in the non-native vegetation that keeps them active, seeking nourishment, but doesn't supply enough of it to energize their life systems. So posters like these encourage people to plant the types of vegetation that will keep these pollinators alive and help them flourish. Now, bees are the most active pollinators. They are drawn to flowers by the sweet nectar. In seeking the nectar, bees end up wearing the flower's pollen, and when they visit the next flower, some of that pollen rubs off, allowing the plant to pollinate and continue its own life cycle. Honeybees are domesticated bees from Europe. They pollinate a great number of crops in the United States. Beekeepers tend their hives where they can harvest the honey that the bees store. The honey is very nutritious, both for the emerging bees and for people. Bees fill each cell with honey and seal each one with wax that they secrete from their bodies. Each hive has one queen bee, the one that lays thousands of eggs. Now, while honey is harvested for people, beekeepers always leave enough honey for the next generation to begin their life cycle again. Honeybees are needed for pollinating crops, so much that some farmers pay beekeepers to transport hives to their fields. Some colonies of honeybees have tragically collapsed. There are tiny mites that are parasites, sucking the life out of the bee's body. There's also the role of pesticides. They contain neurotoxins that can weaken or kill bees. Then there's the disappearance of food sources in their habitat, thus the efforts of planting native vegetation, as we saw earlier. Now, speaking of life cycle, perhaps the most astonishing life cycle is that of another pollinator and favorite insect of many people, the butterfly. We'll get to witness the miracle of butterfly metamorphosis and learn more about these colorful and amazing invertebrates in our next episode. I would love to know if Ramping Up Your English is helping you in your quest for higher English proficiency. You can get in touch with me, send an email to letscreatepro@gmail.com, or visit my website at letscreate.org for all the support materials for this episode. Just navigate to the episode 60 page. You can watch and even download all episodes of Ramping Up Your English at archive.org/details/RogueTV. Use the search box by entering Ramping Up Your English. You'll find all the episodes there. Ramping Up Your English is seen in Ashland on Channel 15 and 115 and others in the Ashland Home Network, and in the rest of Southern Oregon on Charter Cable, Channel 182. Showtimes are 8 o'clock a.m. on Mondays and 7:30 on Thursdays. Showtimes will vary in other areas. Check your local access, public access, and education stations. I want to thank my director, Denise Ross, and my talented and loyal crew, and I want to thank you, our viewers. All of you help make this program an award winner. Join us next time for Ramping Up Your English. I'm John Letz.
You've been watching Ramping Up Your English, a support program for intermediate level English language learners. Learn more. Visit our website at letscreate.org. You can also watch or download today's program at archive.org/details/RogueTV. Join us next time on RBTV Voices for Ramping Up Your English.